This program is about amplifying voices. We allow these voices to assume a position where people can hear what everyone has to say.
In a nutshell, is about contagion, which means how great ideas get spread, how to make them spreadable ideas, ideas that will go viral, ideas that will really engage a larger public. We've had some incredible successes in this room, as we all know, and we have far exceeded the metric expectations. We've had 27 op-eds published already.
I've written 8 op-eds that have been picked up by Al Jazeera America, Reuters, and Pacific Standard. A lot of my writing, I think, has been connected to the ongoing Ukraine crisis. I have tried to spin out different areas of my expertise because so many of them have been related to various sides of how the crisis is discussed in the media. One of the op-eds tied the Ukraine crisis to the release of Wes Anderson's Grand Budapest Hotel film. Another op-ed looked into the possible impact of the sci-fi that's coming out of the Kremlin, and I have tried to kind of tie these very different areas together through my expertise.
The impact I've had through the op-ed project has allowed me to open up conversations in U.S. News and World Report, World Politics Review, Al Jazeera in America, and even with high school educators. After one of the op-ed project meetings, I ran into Leslie Henderson at the gym.
It was probably a half-an-hour conversation standing there by the treadmills rather than exercising.
And we started talking about our fields and how, interestingly, we'd both seen a kind of common gap, that I'm training students in global education who may not be scientifically literate, and she's getting scientists who may not understand how to work in the world.
It is not a good thing to simply say, we're going to train you to be a mathematician or a benchtop scientist, because the really successful people that are going to go out in the world are going to need all of those skills.
We thought, with some humility, I hope, that we were uniquely well placed to have that conversation. And I really felt like I had a partner here who understood the value of what I was doing in the classroom, in some ways better than I did.
The first op-ed I wrote was for the Huffington Post, and it was called The I in Internet Addiction. It occurred to me that I should talk about that in relation to passivity of our consuming of information, and how I might turn that feeling of passivity into action on my own part. What do I have to say about all the things I'm reading all the time?
I've written 4 pieces that have been published at CNN, the Huffington Post, and a blog called Sacred Matters. And I'm working on a couple of other pieces right now.
Writing about music and power, I used as an illustration a fraternity here at Dartmouth that plays music and broadcasts it outside of the fraternity to the street. The brothers from that fraternity, one of them, who was a former student of mine, wrote to me directly to say how much he disagreed with the op-ed. And as we had exchanges back and forth, I finally said, why don't you invite me over to the house to talk to you all, and we'll have a conversation about what it is that I have in mind and what it is that you have in mind. So for an hour, we got together and we wrestled through some of the issues.
So I was wanting to write about gender questions in the game industry. I mean, it's one of these strange industries that doesn't seem to really be striving for equity at all. To really raise an awareness, I really thought, well, what can I do? What can I do? And I happened to be going to the International Game Developers Conference as I was thinking about these issues. And we had just had an op-ed session right before I left. And so I had started thinking about it there. And we were able to time my presence at the conference with the publication of that op-ed. What was really interesting is the way in which the San Francisco Chronicle picked it up. So I didn't know that. I was in the hotel. And I picked up the San Francisco Chronicle, and there was my op-ed. And then another writer at The Atlantic picked up one of the stories and wrote an article about me, about women, unusual careers for women in science.
I've definitely had several people come up to me and talk to me about the op-eds, so it's open conversations that I didn't expect to open.
I've had colleagues that have written and thanked me for writing the articles and said that's a great point of view.
As a scholar, then, I can educate people differently, right? As an informed person, just with my own personal experiences, I might be perceived as being a little bit biased. I think that being a scholar gives me a little bit more credibility and validity.
If I think of my duty to participate in the public sphere, that raises for me a lot of the problematics of the powers of speaking. If I think of it as my right to speak in the public sphere, as everyone has the same right, that feels beautiful, freeing, and infinitely productive.
I work in parts of the world where knowledge is not democratic, where there's not freedom of speech, and where people would be thrilled to have these opportunities. And if they don't have those opportunities, hopefully I can at least contribute to carving out some kind of space for that.
One of the things about the Public Voices Fellowship is we're working with some of the most brilliant minds in the nation, but so much of that conversation is locked. And so one of the endeavors of what we're all doing together is to invest in that brain power, much of which is absent from the public conversation. What could we do, and what would be the return to society if we could invest in all those missing voices and missing ideas?
Since I've begun writing in this format, I do feel validated in a different way than one would feel validated through general academic production, the kinds of things that we are hired in places like Dartmouth to do. Because I know that people that are not just my colleagues or the people who would be peer reviewing me, but also my students, mentors, people that I admire are also reading it.
There are ways for us as scholars to write and talk about the things that we do, reaching the highest levels of our scholarly community, but also reaching out to a wider community. And I do think to the degree that we can master both of those voices, or more than those two voices, we are only better scholars, better humans, better participants in the larger human community.